Well, the question today changed from when will the Trans Mountain Pipeline be built to did we pay too much for it? City News talked to Richard Masson from UFC with his thoughts on the debate over what Ottawa paid and will it ever pay off?
So could you tell me about some of the findings of this report?
So the report took a basic look at different ways to value the pipeline and to see if the Canadian taxpayer got a good deal. And essentially what they did was they valued the base pipeline that's been operating for 50 years, and then they valued the Trans Mountain Expansion project, which is yet to be built. And what they said was we paid about $4.4 billion for an asset that could be worth $3.6 to $4.7 billion. So they said we paid at the top end of the range for this pipeline under the assumptions they had. And there's a lot of things that you can tweak in any kind of assessment like that.
So that being said, we paid on the higher end of the range. Do you think that the government overpaid for the Trans Mountain Pipeline?
Well, I think it's a kind of a moot point because they didn't have a lot of choices. Kinder Morgan, who had owned the pipeline, had been working to build it for many years. They decided that there were just so many risks being thrown at them from governments trying to launch lawsuits, others launching lawsuits, potential delays from civil disobedience and protests, and from delayed permits, that they just said this is too risky for our shareholders. And because we know this is in the national interest to build this pipeline, it was really for the government to step in. So they didn't have a lot of time to negotiate or a lot of leverage to negotiate. They had to get the pipeline and find a way to make it something we could build.
Do we typically see cost overruns with big projects like these?
It depends on what your estimate is and how good your estimate is. So in building a pipeline, it's a lot more certain than something like building a refinery. You can estimate the costs of pipe, you can estimate the costs of pump stations, and so you can often get those quite accurate. Delays that come from court cases or from other things like delayed permits can add a lot of cost to a pipeline. And so it just depends on how this whole process is going to play out, whether the cost overruns happen. One of the things to note is there is a delay right now because of the Federal Court of Appeal, but they haven't spent a lot of money on the project yet. So they've spent about $900 million on the project. And so the delay is not as bad as if it was 4 years into the project and we'd spent $8 billion and then we hit another year delay because all that money sits there and has to compound. So it's right now we're in a bit of a tough spot, but it doesn't mean good management can't keep it close to on time and close to on budget.
So we haven't hit rock bottom yet, is what you're saying. And that being said, if the government were to build the Trans Mountain Pipeline, do you think in the end this will be a good investment?
Oh, it's an absolutely necessary investment for our country. So if you think about it, Alberta produces 3.6 million barrels a day right now, and this pipeline is one of the shortest pipelines to get to world markets. It provides us access to tankers and allows us to export our oil and help get world price. So the report came out and said if we could get a $5 per barrel better price for our heavy oil, that would be a $6 billion a year benefit to the country. And governments get, federal government gets 15% of that through income tax. Alberta gets 12% of that through income tax, plus they get royalties. So that's about a $2.5 billion a year benefit to governments. So that's why when the Cabinet approved it, it was viewed to be in the national interest. This is important for Canada to help get a fair world price for our oil.